When a child does something and they are scolded, first it instills fear inside them. They are actually not learning why you are scolding them. Instead of scolding, we are able to ask questions because that makes a child think, and that's when they know that next time I don't have to repeat this behavior. Understanding your own childhood as a parent, because the way you were treated, the way you felt have basically formed your belief system. Apologizing to your child is not a sign of weakness because that shows your vulnerable side to your child, and they know that everybody has a bad day. People want to be harsh with their kids so that the child is strong when they go out in the world. This is a very big myth because
Hey parents, welcome to another episode of the Modern Indian Parent Podcast. I'm Sanchita Daswani, a pediatric nutritionist, and every week we bring you episodes where we are redefining parenting in Indian families. So let's bust some myths and own our modern parenting choices. Today on the episode, we have with us Priya Kanakia, who is the founder of Thought Circle. She is a parent educator and counselor, and her focus is all on conscious parenting, where she's not only helping us as parents raise emotionally strong kids, but also helping us as parents heal from our childhood trauma so that we can make sure that we give the best to our kids. In this episode, we're really going to talk all about what is conscious parenting. How did it start? Why is it so important? And if you as a parent want to become a conscious parent, what are the steps that we need to take in order to do so? So let's welcome Priya onto the podcast. Welcome, Priya, to the Modern Indian Parent Podcast. How are you doing today?
very well, Sanchita. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm good, and thank you so much for being here today. The work you do is helping so many parents and kids, and this podcast is really about redefining parenting in Indian families. And I think so many of us today, as a modern Indian parent, we want to do things a bit differently. Before we get into that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this journey? I always talk to Rini about this. It's not like when we were kids, we're like, oh, we want to grow up and be someone that's helping parents with conscious parenting. So, how did you get in this journey?
All right. I was actually working with teenagers for about
Mm.
6 years from 2014 to before COVID. And while working with teens, I realized two most important things. One is that they were struggling with their emotions. And secondly, that their relationship with their parents was a little shaky. So that's when that got me thinking that why is it that I'm working with so many teenagers and I'm actually seeing a pattern. Why is there a pattern where everybody is in that space? And most importantly, when I look back to my childhood, my teen life, and my relationship with my parents, I realized that it was the same thing. And that's when I started reflecting on my teen journey and, what I was facing. And that's when I realized I had nobody to talk to. And secondly, nobody taught us how to face our own emotions, how to understand our own emotions, what's happening inside me, and why am I feeling what I'm feeling, and what do I have to do about it?
I think that's the foundation because even for us, like when I'm talking about food and kids, everyone says it's okay. All of us adults eat, we all chew our food. Like, what does it matter? But actually, no. A lot of us have issues with our relationship with food because of the way we grew up. So, same thing with emotions.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's where it all started from because I was like, okay, we need to get the foundation right because when I was 25, I started doing therapy and my therapist asked me to repeat just simple lines like, I love myself, I trust myself. And I was like, oh my God, why do I have to repeat this to myself right now? Isn't that how I was already born? Something happened on the way, that means. And that's when I was like, okay, we're not getting the foundation right.
Yeah, and even yeah, that's what I feel because even now I'm learning about affirmations. Like I've just started doing that like 2 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I wish I had said this. I wish I was stronger as a kid. I wish I had learned these things. So I think that's why so many of us modern Indian parents we are leaning towards a different way of parenting. So I know you focus on conscious parenting. So can you just explain to us What does that even mean? I've heard of gentle parenting. So is it the same thing?
If you observe our parents' generation, they focused a little more on the physical aspect of getting things right, like making sure that we are going to the best school, giving us the best amenities, and, giving us good clothes and all of that, which is an evolution from where they were coming from. So that was that phase where, there lacked awareness about emotional quotient, the emotional aspect of what a child needs while growing up, and how the parents' behavior or their emotions is actually affecting the child. So that was hardly a point because they focused more on the physical aspect and not on the emotional aspect. Because as a society, also, if you see back then, they were more focused on just getting things done. It wasn't about what you're feeling, why you're feeling, what's happening. It was always like brushing it under the carpet. It was always like, okay, what you're feeling like this doesn't matter, just get over it. But
Yeah.
now we've come to that space where our children are never actually going to see a problem with the physical sustenance part of it. So now we've moved the next level of evolution. So we've got to look at the emotional aspect of things. So which is where the shift and the change has come about. And I would say, especially after COVID, because a lot of parents have started acknowledging the fact that it's not my child, it's actually me.
So, conscious parenting is really looking at not just the physical, but understanding the emotions, not only of our kids, but also us as parents. So, it's working on both. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First, it's working on ourselves and then working on the child because that's where the role modeling happens. And even one more aspect that I'd add over here about conscious parenting is understanding your own childhood as a parent. Because that's where a lot of the way you are being with your child, that's where a lot of it is coming from your childhood because the way you were treated, the way you felt, the way things happened with you, whole lot of those things are going to have basically formed your belief system, and that's where you're operating from. So getting aware about your childhood, your wounds, how you felt as a child, your belief system, that's conscious parenting actually.
I remember saying, I'm not going to be this kind of parent. Once you're aware, you're like, okay, my parents did this. I'm going to make sure I don't do this with my child.
Sure.
But for some reason, I've noticed with myself, it somehow comes out.
Yeah,
Even if you
you
don't
just do this.
realize, it
Yeah,
just happens that I'm like, I'm never going to do this with my child. But somehow I start saying it because it's just so
yeah,
in us. So,
yes,
in terms of us as parents who are like, okay, we want to be aware, like, I think the first step is awareness, as you said.
yes,
Now,
absolutely.
for example, if we're in that awareness stage, how do we kind of make sure we don't do it again? Or what would be that second step after awareness? How do we kind of shift and make that difference?
It's the mindset. I tell everybody this. Like, I work with parents, and I honestly don't do a lot of work just on giving parenting tips, but my work is a lot more on the mindset that you carry. Like, say, for example, a mindset about tantrums that people have carried for the longest of the time is that the child is being disobedient or the child is not respectful, um, or they are just manipulating. Now, this is a certain kind of belief system around tantrums that has been going on for years. But if you see that just a shift in the mindset and the right knowledge is where the whole game changes. Like if we start viewing it differently, that the tantrum is because my child is facing a hard time. It's because their brain is being developed, it's because they need connection at this very moment. Like if the mindset changes, you start looking at it in a different light. So similarly, how you said that, you exactly started replicating the same thing, even despite of knowing that I
Yeah.
don't want to repeat the same behavior. It's about getting aware that yes, I have been doing this, and then shifting the perspective from the belief system space, because that's where the shift will happen. If we just try to work on the behavior is guided by our beliefs. So there is, So if you work on the belief system, you work on your thought process. If you work on your thought process, you work on your emotions. You work on your emotions, your actions are directly affected by it. So it's a chain, a very subconscious chain that happens.
Yeah, and I know this happens a lot with food because so many times when our kids are throwing the spoon or they say we don't want to eat, we take it personally. We take
Yes,
it that it's an attack on us, that they are just trying to get their way. And of course, they have some level of that because they're showing their personality. But I think two things that we have to figure out as parents is number one, why is it triggering us so much? Like for me, it triggers me because I'm like, I'm a nutritionist, my kids need to eat perfectly, so it triggers me. And the second thing
yes,
is that like I'm like, why, like I think, oh, they just want to make a scene. But then I also, and I tell my clients, I'm like, you know what, think of it like, why are they not hungry? Are they full? Are they feeling scared of the food? So I like that you said that. I think not only do we have to change our mindset, but also look at their perspective and where they're coming from, and not look at it that they're just trying to rile us up.
absolutely, absolutely. Looking at our own triggers, like you said, is the most important thing because that helps you understand your beliefs. And that's where everything begins.
So I want to talk a little bit more about conscious parenting in the sense that it is relatively new in the way a lot of us have not grown up this way. But there are still a lot of people who are not so into conscious parenting. And I want to ask you about this because number one, a lot of them, because of the way we've grown up, they're like, we're fine and we'll be fine. What do you say, or how do you feel about people who are still kind of relying on the old ways, like, hitting or scolding? Is that okay? Is there some midway, or that's something we really need to move away from?
Right. So yes, a lot of parents rely on punishing and, scolding, yelling. Okay, what that does to a child's brain is something we need to understand. When a child does something and they are scolded, first it instills fear inside them. They're actually not learning why you are scolding them. Like if the child has dropped a glass and they are
Yeah.
being scolded, the child is going to be fearful next time making a mistake. Their brain is actually going to
Yeah.
go into a survival mode where they are going to think that I can't be myself in front of my parent. I can't be truthful in front of my parents. But at the same time, if instead of scolding, we are able to ask questions, I just tell all the clients that I work with that you just need to make a small tweak. Just ask questions because that makes a child think. If you ask the child that, okay, if you're holding the glass this way, what about holding it some other way? Or what about getting it a tray? Or, how about if you support it with something else? Just asking a question to the child will make the child think. And that's when they'll know that next time I don't have to repeat this behavior.
Yeah, because I think growing up, so many of us, I was scared. Like sometimes I get scared to even like if I fell or something, because I was like, oh, my parents will just yell at me instead of. So I think so many of us are scared today of making mistakes, not doing our best. We have a lot of insecurities, imposter syndrome because of that, and showing our kids that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, but my question is, I think for so many people, they say, if you just are like, okay, how do you feel? Or like, do you feel conscious parenting sometimes not creates, but nurtures kids who are too soft, who are too undisciplined? There's that whole aspect of, are we being too kind or too understanding?
Okay. So, firstly, conscious parenting is about the parent first. So, it's about me being conscious about my way of being around the child, my emotions. First is that.
Okay.
Second, I get this a lot of times that, if I'm going to be too kind, too gentle, then I'm going to raise a kid who is going to, not being able to face the world. This is
Yeah.
something I get a lot. So what I say to this is that it's a very big misconception that I've seen that people want to be harsh with their kids or be critical with their kids so that the child is strong when they go out in the world. This is a very big myth because when we are critical and harsh with our kids at home, it breaks their spirit. They are those broken people who go out in the world and hurt more people. So rather, being the kind of parent who is kind but yet firm is what conscious parenting is all about. So the child's spirit is not broken. The child's spirit is intact at home. And when they are moving out in the world, they know my family, my parents are my back support system. You know, that's what conscious parenting is about.
You're so right, because actually, I think that is what made me realize, because I've done a few courses like on gentle parenting. I was reading a few books as well. And actually, one major thing, and I think the most difficult thing we have as parents, is about setting those boundaries. Because I know you mentioned about being firm. So I think that's where, so for example, when it comes to meal times, a lot of clients will say, oh, but he doesn't want to eat. So, I'll just give him something else. I'm being a kind parent or whatever. But I say, no, it's about acknowledging their feelings, setting a
Yeah.
boundary, and then giving them something to look forward to. I think it's called that sandwich rule, where you say, like, I understand you don't want to eat it, but this is what's there on the menu. And then you
Yes.
can have like this next or not. So I think it's a whole different response that we have. So is that what you're talking about in terms of the way that we do conscious parenting is to be kind, but at the same time have those boundaries?
Yes, absolutely. Being kind and having those boundaries, firm boundaries, is the way, because if you're being too kind, you're giving in to
Yeah.
the child, and the child is too small to understand what's right,
Yes.
what's wrong, what needs to be done. As a parent, we are the guiding light. So we have to guide the child in some way. Another, being too strict or being too firm is the old way of parenting where everything needs to be done my way. Whatever I say has to be done. So these are two ends if you go to see, like, like a pendulum. So
Yeah.
being at one extreme and the other one being at another extreme. But here, the point is that you've got to come in the middle. You've got to find a middle ground where you are kind, you're understanding the child's feelings. Like, yeah, say for example, I understand that you're feeling hurt. I understand that you are finding it difficult to leave your cousin's place right now, but it's time to go home.
Yeah.
So making a boundary where, you're not just giving in or you're not just making the child do what you want, but it's a thin line of understanding the child, giving them the independence to do things, at the same time getting them to follow the boundary.
Yeah, I remember so many times my kids would have tantrums and I would just be like, stop it. Just don't do this to me right now. I don't have the time for it. And
Yeah,
then when I switch my approach to be like, I understand you're feeling upset right now, I give them a hug, I'd give them a minute to calm down.
yeah,
It was like a sudden change, a
yeah,
sudden shift. They were suddenly like, yeah, I know. I think that
yeah,
connection is
yeah,
what so many of us as parents today are trying to do. That's what we're
yeah.
working on, which a lot of us didn't have as a kid, that connection. There's a lot of things we've been through in our childhood. So I know you said the first thing is awareness, changing our mindset, but a lot of times that's hard for us. Is there any tips in terms of how we as parents can heal from certain traumas or certain things? Is it something that we should make sure we do before we have kids, or, because it's so many times when we're questioning when we should have kids. So is it something that we should have as our healing journey from before, or how would you suggest us to even start bringing awareness about this?
Yes, I would say definitely it's best if you work on your childhood related trauma or wounds or whatever you've been through in your life before having the child, but it's never late. It's never ever late. Whenever you
Yeah.
realize that I am going through certain things or I have been through certain things which are showing up in my life right now, you just start working on it. I would not say that it's late, because whenever
Yeah.
you get the understanding, that's the perfect time you've got in your life.
So I'm trying to do the gentle parenting. Some days I'm like, guys, I'm too tired. Like, but I think
Yeah,
we all are really trying. And I
yeah.
remember that what I do and what my parents never did is I do say sorry to my kids sometimes. So, like, for example, if I had a really long day or maybe I yelled at them at the end of the day, I'm like, sorry, guys, I've just had a rough day today. And, sometimes when I'm upset, I just take it out. But there's a lot
Yeah,
going on. And I remember one of my friends told me, she got really upset. She's like, why are you apologizing to your children? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you are who you are, own it. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to be vulnerable and explain to them that we all have our days. And it's okay to be sad one day, happy one day. We don't need to show our kids that we are perfect.
Yeah.
Can you advise, like, is that the right is it okay to apologize? Is it okay to say to our kids we've made mistakes? Is that showing that we are weak? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that is the old perspective, right? Which our parents had. They never wanted to
Yeah,
show us that they're struggling. When you say sorry to your child, it's not about being overly kind and giving in to everything that the child is saying. That's not the meaning of sorry, right? Redefining the meaning of sorry, that whatever you did, you're sorry for that, not about
right,
what your child is feeling and you're sorry for what they are feeling, right?
right,
So definitely, I mean, apologizing to your child is not a sign of weakness, definitely, because that shows your vulnerable side to your child. And they know that everybody has a bad day and it's okay to have a bad day.
suppose let's give a situation here that you're a parent, and you're at the grocery store, and your child is just screaming that they want an ice cream, or and they're just yelling, and you're trying to calm them down. How would you suggest parents go about a situation like that?
So basically, we need to understand the child's perspective that at the supermarket, the child is really like overstimulated with the fancy products that they are seeing on the shelf and buy the chocolates and candies or whatever the packets that they are seeing there. So they are naturally going to be all over the place. So this here it means that basically their emotional side of the brain has taken over and they're not thinking logically, right? Like as an adult that, okay, this is going to harm my body or this is going to like, I can't eat this. They can't think like that. So their emotional side takes over and they are like stimulated and they just want what they want, right? So that's the time to actually empathize with the child and draw a strong boundary. So here the first thing the child needs is some form of physical connection from you. So the best thing is to go down to their level, look at them in the eye so that it just gets them back to, all the stimulations, just getting back in the moment with
Focus.
you, focus with you. And then another thing is just giving like a touch or, just making them feel that, okay, I'm here for you. I'm here to guide you, to help you, or just to understand what you feel. That connection will first ground them, will center them, will get them to actually talk to you. And then you can just simply say that, yeah, I understand that, you want all of these things. Of course, you have to draw a boundary according to what is possible.
Yeah,
So if you
yeah,
feel that, okay, you can buy something, then you do buy it. That's okay. But you draw a boundary that, okay, this is something which we will have only in the evening. So you take it along those lines. Like you have to play it by the ear, but you have to make them feel validated that it's okay to feel all over the place. Or,
yeah,
I understand that you're finding it difficult to, listen to what I'm saying.
yeah,
So
yeah.
getting their feelings acknowledged, having their feelings validated, and then drawing a boundary or simply giving options, which makes them feel that, okay, I do have some control over this situation. It's not like I have to just listen to what is being said.
Yeah, I think that's worked really well with my kids. But I do know, because obviously when we think of conscious parenting, we're like, oh, it's all great, we're all emotional and we're just being ourselves. But I know there are some kids who really are a bit stronger in their personality. Not all kids will eventually be like, okay, and they're not going to just give in like that. So, how
Yeah.
do you advise parents who have kids who are very strong, who are not able to kind of handle that emotion or kind of get it in that way? Any tips for parents?
Okay. So on those lines, firstly, what's important is that those are the kids who need to see that something is in their power as well,
Mm.
because they are strong-willed. They can't be giving away all the power. After we acknowledge, validate, give connection and all of that, they need to see that something is within their power as well. So, giving them some option where, this is, you choose. This is your choice. because they're not going to listen unless and until they have the opportunity to make some decision.
Yeah, I think that control is very important.
That control needs to be
Kids,
given to them.
yeah, especially that 1 to 3 years of age, that's when they realize they're their own person. They want to do things their own way, and they're also learning about the world. So making them feel like they are in charge by simply giving them two options that you are okay with. Like, would you like to
That you
play
are
this
okay, which
game
are
or that
possible.
game?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense for you. I want to talk to you about intuition because I see this a lot every day because I work with clients when it comes to meal times. So the biggest thing I tell parents is that a lot of times kids will have 2, 3 bites and they're like, we're done. We're full. And then we as parents panic, saying, oh my God, how can our kids have only 2 bites? And that's actually where the forcing and the TV distractions come in because
Come
we're like, no, 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 it's not possible. But I think for parents, what they're starting to learn is that they need to trust their child, that there's a reason they're saying they're done. And I think that's the biggest struggle we have as parents to actually trust our kids that what they're telling us is actually what they feel. Because so many times as parents, we feel they're too young. They're too young to know that they're full. They're too young to know their emotions. So at what age do we draw that line that we can trust our kids for the decisions that they are making for themselves at such a early age?
I'm glad you asked this because I do connect this to the spiritual angle. When you ask that at what age can we trust the child, it's very important to understand that each child is born with an intuitive voice. And why spiritual angle is because we say that, right? That God is in me, God is in you. What is that intuitive voice that your child is born with? It is God's voice. It is basically a guiding light that we are born with. Each of us individuals are born with that intuitive voice. But what happens when we don't listen to the child's voice? Like, say, for example, they are not comfortable being around somebody or they're not comfortable eating certain kind of food. And, we just kind of shove it that, what, she's your aunt, you have to be nice with her. You know what, this is your food, you have to eat this. So when we do that, we shut down their intuitive voice over and over and over and over the years. And that's when you find adults who are struggling to make decisions, struggling to understand what's right for me, struggling to making choices as to what to do in life in terms of career, in terms of relationships. So I feel that that intuitive voice is very, very, very important to keep intact in the child's life by trusting them from the very beginning as to what their voice is trying to say. Of course, we also need to draw that line as a parent. It's not about letting the child do whatever they want, but also trusting the child as per their age capacity. So if they are 2 years or 4 years, trusting them with simple things like food or how they feel about people, all that is okay.
So I think that's so important. I think all of us parents need to that trust our kids a bit more. There's a reason. Like I remember my son, he used to every time he used to eat dal, like when he was 1.5, he used to like be in pain and he was like, I don't want it, but I used to force him. Like you have to eat your dal. And
Yeah,
he was like in the night uncomfortable, he had tummy pain, and then later I found out he had major gut issues, and there was a reason he was telling me no, but I refused to trust him or understand why he's saying no.
yeah.
So I think really what's so important here for us parents is to just be mindful, to be aware, to tune into our kids emotions, how they're feeling. And I think if we just build that awareness, that can really make a big difference, as you said.
Absolutely. Like how you
Yeah.
just said, when I was a kid, I was lactose intolerant.
Mm.
And dairy is like such an important thing. Like, how can you give up milk and how can you not
Yeah.
have the ghee in or ghee in an Indian household, right?
Yeah.
So I remember, everybody trying to feed me that milk, but for
Yeah.
like honestly, like I grew up being confused about why do I feel like this when I have dairy or what's wrong with me. But I just later realized that that's something that just upsets my gut and that's okay.
Really, to understand this, what you're saying is for conscious parenting, the first step for us is to understand our feelings, our childhood trauma, acknowledge that, work on that, and then when it comes to our kids, also be aware of the way we are responding acknowledge their feelings, their emotions, but also hold some boundaries and give them options so that they also feel they are a bit in control. Am I getting that right in terms of the flow a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Starting with
Mhm.
us for sure, and then getting things right from there. But yeah, you're going on the right track.
It's quite fascinating to see how all of us parents today are just trying to change the game. So, for parents who are listening in, and this is something I really want to do, or this is something I really want to change my way of parenting, can you tell us a little bit more about how people can work with you, or how can they just start that journey for conscious parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so how I generally work with parents is go back to your childhood first. So I have a 3 month journey where in the first month I take them back to their childhood, understand what happened over there, extract a lot of stuff like your beliefs, like your thinking pattern, the regrets that you carry, the pain that you carry, the shame that you carry. Because there is a lot that we carry as parents, as humans, forget parents, just as humans from our childhood. So we carry a lot of those things from our childhood. So I first get them to acknowledge, understand all of those things. Then what we work on is letting go. Because letting go
Yeah,
of
that's big.
everything that you're carrying. It's like I usually give them an example of a radio, where you tune in into the frequency. If you're operating from a frequency of shame, you are going to attract that. If you are going to operate from a frequency of hurt, you are going to attract that. So, second thing is to just let go. Letting go of whatever has happened. And there are processes that I follow that I make them do for the letting go process. So that happens, and then we rewire the way you think. So there is a lot of rewiring via affirmations and different processes via which you change the perspective. It's like changing your glasses, if you're wearing a glass with, say, green color, you're going to look at things in a green way. But if you're going to wear glasses with a red, now we are looking at things differently. So I help them to change and shift their perspective about the way they are looking at their kids, the way they're looking at themselves, the way they are approaching parenting in general. And then I take them through a little bit of a self-love and a compassion journey because this is something which I feel is missing again. Because we
Yeah.
were never taught how to be kind, how to be compassionate with our own selves. So we struggle with that. A lot of parents I work with struggle with what is being kind to my own self. They don't even know that. So, say for
I,
example, having a bad day is okay. That's
yeah.
when you just need to be kind with yourself.
Yeah, I think that mom guilt is something that's there in all of us. We feel guilty, we didn't do something, we did something, and then that really takes a toll, and then that affects how we are with kids. And what I really love about what you do is because most of the courses I've seen are just about, okay, this is what you say, this is how you say it. But I like that you really take that time to help parents understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from, and also teach them to self love, because I do feel a lot of the way I am is not maybe what my parents told me, but it's just the way they brought me up and certain mannerisms and the way they were. They didn't, directly tell me to be like this, but it tends to reflect. And I see that now with my kids. Like my husband will like make fun of me. He's like, the way, my daughter sometimes she says something, he's like exactly how you would say it. And also another thing I tell him, and I said, like before I used to be very hard. I used to be, oh my God, I have like, oh my God, she's saying it exactly like I would. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm doing my best. Like I'm
Yeah,
trying my best. And okay, maybe she gets a little bit of this silly habit I have or something. But I think
yeah,
also just understanding that in this whole journey of conscious parenting, it's okay. It's not like you're gonna be 100% and your kids are gonna be perfect and you're gonna do everything. So I'm sure you say
right.
that as well. That it's not gonna be that everything has to be perfect. Of course, you be vulnerable, all of that, but I think I've also let go in that way that I'm doing my best, but not everything will transfer. There will be some things I'm still healing from that are reflecting on my kids. So I think
Yeah.
that's also important for parents to understand, no?
Absolutely. Not trying to hit perfectionism and
Yeah.
also being absolutely kind with yourself in the journey because change is hard and it's okay to struggle. I mean, it's okay to accept that you are struggling sometimes with bringing about that change. And sometimes it is hard to, handle the child, handle your own emotions at the same time. So
Yeah.
giving yourself that grace that it's all right, I'm also learning and it's okay. And like okaying your child's feelings, okaying your own feelings as well. It's not like we're going to see a massive shift and everything is going to be perfect. We don't have to go by a book. It's more about like you and I, we all have our individual unique personalities. So we are going to operate by that. So you can't, I mean, it's not like, okay, so if I'm doing conscious parenting, I have to fit into a mold. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Understanding that we are going to make our share of mistakes and it's a learning curve.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing everything and giving us so much of an insight. I think everyone who's watching this or listening to this will really want to make a change in their way of parenting and just be a bit more aware and accept our kids also accept our kids for who they are and help them in the process of learning their emotions. So, thank you so much for joining us today for the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sanchita, for having me here. I always enjoy these kind of conversations, where we are talking about the new ways of parenting and going back and actually working from your roots because that's where a lot of things lie. So, very happy to have the
Yes.
conversation and spread this knowledge to people.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're going to be linking her details also below if you'd like to get in touch with her. So we'll see you guys for the next episode. Thank you so much.